You may be finding yourself in a tough market where it's difficult to rent your home. It's difficult to find a home in the neighborhood you want to rent. It's difficult to sell your home, to buy a home in a decent price in a decent neighborhood. What can you do and how fast can you get it done? We are going to find out today. Stay with me. Today's story is an actual case of a lady who had a beautiful home, and it was priced right, and yet for several months on the market, she was unable to rent it as she typically had been able to rent it in the past. What did she do? What steps did she take to manifest her results? Well, let's get into the intriguing details of this story based on the Power of Awareness, Chapter 23, and this is story number 5, and it's an unusual case event. So let's see what happened and how she was able to rent her home, and how she did it so quickly after having it for months on the market without success. Notice, this case is especially interesting because of the short interval of time between the application of the law of assumption and its visible manifestation. A very prominent woman came to me in deep concern. She maintained a lovely city apartment and a large country home, but because of the many demands made upon her were greater than her modest income, it was absolutely essential that she rent her apartment if she and her family were to spend the summer at their country home. In previous years, the apartment had been rented without difficulty early in the spring. But the day she came to me, the rental season for summer sublets was over. The apartment had been in the hands of the best real estate agents for months, but no one had been interested even in coming to see it. However, this is where the power of imagination, being instructed through Neville on how to apply the law of assumption, brings success. So this is where we really need to give attention to what is said next, because in this is the lesson for you and I. You see, most of us, if not all of you, at some point have rented or purchased a home, perhaps sought to rent your home or rent another home, and found challenges along the way. How can we get around those challenges using the law of assumption? Notice what follows here and you'll find out. So here she came to Neville for personal coaching and consultation, and this is how the story unfolds. When she had described her predicament, I explained how the law of assumption could be brought to bear on solving her problem. I suggested that by imagining the apartment had been rented by a person desiring immediate occupancy, and by assuming that this was the case, her apartment actually would be rented. Next, Neville is going to explain to her briefly how to use the alpha meditative state while going to sleep and imagining what you desire to be true. And I will leave you another link for that meditation and how to use the law of assumption and that meditation. Meanwhile, I invite you to stay with me here because this is really the depth of understanding and appreciation that will benefit you also by understanding how she applied it and followed Neville's directions. And here was his directive. In order to create the necessary feeling of naturalness, the feeling that it was already a fact that her apartment was rented, I suggested that she drift off into sleep that very night, imagining herself not in her apartment, but in whatever place she would sleep were the apartment suddenly rented. She quickly grasped the idea and said that in such a situation, she would sleep in her country home. Even though it was not yet open for the summer, she would do this in her imagination. And this is where, as a coach, I really want to take a moment and make sure that you understand this part. It seems quite simple, but it's very important. You see, she hadn't rented her apartment yet, but Neville imagined that she had already rented it quickly and that someone wanted immediate occupancy. And to do this, he had her imagine sleeping elsewhere, not in her apartment. So she chose to sleep in her summer home where she wanted to be able to sleep, but only it would happen if she rented her home and it was already rented. So that's indeed what she did. In actuality, what she did is what Neville calls, in her imagination, making there, where she wanted to be, as if here, already done. She imagined that she was already in her summer home and that right where she was in her apartment bed, that she was sleeping in her summer home. She did this all in her imagination, making the future now, making herself there already and imagining it right in the now, that it had been rented immediately and that she would be able to stay in her summer home. All by the use of her power of imagination of it already being done and imagining it true. Neville continues, this interview took place on Thursday. At 9 o'clock the following Saturday, she phoned me from her home in the country, excited and happy. She told me that on Thursday night, she had fallen asleep using the Alpha meditation, actually imagining and feeling she was sleeping in her other bed, in her country home, many miles from the city apartment she was occupying. On Friday, the very next day, a highly desirable tenant, one who met all her requirements, as a responsible person, not only rented the apartment, but rented it on the condition that he could move in that very day. And so, yes, she manifested renting that home after months not having success using the best real estate agents in the area, but by using the power of her imagination that she was already sleeping in her country home and that her apartment was already rented immediately, she was able to manifest her desired outcome. Do you see the lesson in it for yourself? Whether it be for a home or anything else, the power of assumption, the power of using your imagination has been proven time and time again. In my next story in this series, which I'll hold off for a few days and invite you to come back, you're going to see, as number 6 says, the most complete and intense use of the law of assumption, because it was used in a case of healing. I'm not going to share that with you yet. Holding off, so please join me again. In the meantime, click above for more to continue to learn how to use the law of assumption now in your life.